think you're going to find that it's packed with images that hint at stories. I've seen the deck, but I don't know any of the stories, so I'm really looking forward to sitting through Elizabeth's presentation. I actually met Elizabeth through our past presenter, Amanda Kaiser, and Amanda assures me we are all in for a great presentation. So today's speaker is Elizabeth Weaver Engel. She is the CEO and Chief Strategist at Spark Consulting. And for more than 20 years, she's helped associations grow in membership, marketing, communications, public presence, and especially revenue, which is what Spark is all about. She speaks and writes frequently on a variety of topics in association management. And when she's not helping associations grow, Elizabeth loves to dance, swing and belly dance, as I'm told. She likes to listen to live music, to cook, and to garden. Both Elizabeth and I are active on Twitter and LinkedIn, and we'd love to see any quotes or thoughts that you thought resonated. So please feel free to share there. You'll see on the screen Elizabeth's Twitter handle and her LinkedIn account, and we look forward to those posts. So with that, Elizabeth, host away.
All right. I'm waiting for the transfer of control to come over. Jason, have you been able to, there we go. Jason? Excellent. There we go. Okay, I now have control. Excellent. So, as Jason mentioned, this is going to be, or intended to be, an interactive presentation, despite the fact that we're all on a webinar. And so we're going to be talking about leading member engagement from the outside in. But before I get into all of that, I wanted to know if you walked in the virtual door, I guess, with any questions about member engagement or anything in particular that you know that you want to learn about member engagement today. So as Jason mentioned, he and Kristen are going to be keeping an eye on the chat. If you do have something that you wanted to know or wanted to learn specifically about member engagement, go ahead and start plugging that in there. And I'm going to do a quick overview of our agenda, and then I will turn back to Jason and Kristen real quick to just see if any questions have come in. Okay, so this is what we're going to be talking about today. The first thing I want to talk about is what is an outside-in or member-centric approach to member engagement? Where did it come from? What's the research behind it? You know, what's behind this whole idea, and why is it important? And then we're going to identify 8 keys to outside-in or member-centric thinking. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, this webinar is only an hour. How is she going to get through 8 keys? And the answer is, I'm not actually going to be able to get through 8 keys in an hour. I tried it once, and let's just say it didn't work. So this is a bit of a choose-your-own-adventure webinar, which means once we take a look at the 8 keys, I'm going to want you to identify the 4 or so you want to hear more about today. So then,
Elizabeth?
Yes, sorry.
We're not seeing your slide, so I wanted to make you aware it's not broadcasting your slide.
All right. I am not seeing. Shoot. Okay, thank you.
So the share at the bottom.
Okay.
In the worst case, if need be, I can share again and I can advance the slides. I'll just have to sit here listening for you to say go.
Yeah, I am not seeing the sharing option.
Sometimes it slips behind the window. So you see participants QA?
Yes.
Okay, but you're not seeing share.
I am not.
It may be that I'm showing you as logged in as a panelist, so just in case, why don't I go ahead and share my screen in the interest of time?
That sounds great.
Sure.
So I am on the agenda slide right now, which is slide number 6.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone.
It's all the practice in the world, right?
Right. Okay, there we go. Yes, perfect. So as I was saying, we are in a bit of a choose-your-own-adventure situation, which will be fun for Jason trying to keep up with me. But yes, we'll want to talk about, of these 8 keys, which are the 4 that you most want to hear more about today. So then the question becomes, well, what about the other ones? And this presentation is taken from a white paper that I'll talk more about in a minute, that we will also make sure that all of you get. So don't worry that you're not going to hear about all 8 keys on the session today. You will get a chance to learn about all of them via the white paper. And then finally, I will want to pose a question for you all, which is, what will you do differently tomorrow? Kind of the idea of circling back to what, how this presentation will hopefully change what you actually do. In some fundamental or meaningful way, both for your association and for your members. So Jason, go ahead and advance to the next slide. So as I mentioned, this is taken from a white paper that is entitled Leading Engagement from the Outside In, Become an Indispensable Partner in Your Member Success. And I had written this with Anna Caravelli of the Demand Networks. And again, that's the URL right there where you can download it, and we'll make sure that it accompanies the recording of the session that you'll be getting after the session. So Anna and I are both longtime association people and consultants in the space and all that kind of thing. And we both think about and talk about and write about member engagement quite a bit. And we had noticed that there was an increasing amount of chatter in the association space about member engagement. And I think that at least a part of that is because a lot of our interactions with our members are increasingly mediated by technology. So because of that, we can track what's going on more easily. And then when you're starting to be able to track all these interactions, then you can start doing more reporting and scoring and all that kind of thing. So, so member engagement kind of became a really hot topic in associations in the past couple of years. And Anna and I had the same question occur to both of us at the same time on our next slide here, which is, if engagement is, go ahead and advance. Yes, if engagement is critical to associations, but we're not doing it all that well, why is that? That doesn't seem to make any sense. And our thesis was that the reason that associations aren't doing engagement well and aren't engaging our members well is because we've been thinking about engagement backwards. Next slide, Jason. So the key question here for you is, what engages you? And if you want, go ahead and throw some of the things in the chat there. And I want you to think about things that engage you personally. So, as Jason mentioned, one of the things that I love is live music. That engages me personally. So I like to go out and hear live music here in DC. I like to go out and hear live music when I am traveling. I am highly motivated to find out who's playing in what cities and what clubs and what are the great places to go hear jazz and what are the great places to go hear blues and who are the great local bands and, are there jazz jams or are there fun blues bars? Do they have a dance floor? Because I love to dance, nobody has to market that to me. Nobody has to sell me on, you're going to be in Detroit. Like now we have to push all this information to you about the local music scene here. Nobody has to try to sell me on that or push that on me or market it to me. I'm inherently interested in checking that out myself. No one has to convince me to go find out what's going on in the local live music scene because I want to do that. That intrinsically meets a need for me. So Jason, if you can flip ahead, this is kind of the crux of the matter for associations, right? In our existing model of member engagement, we tend to put the association at the center of our focus. And that makes sense because we're actually engaged in the work of the association 40 plus hours a week, right? It's very central to our own thinking and our own perspective in our own world. But then what happens is we look at the world from the perspective of the association. We put the association's needs at the center of our thinking. So, we need to fill board seats. We need to fill committee seats. We have certain revenue goals for the association. We have certain recruitment goals, retention goals. There are goals that we want to achieve with regards to attendance at our events and participation in our professional development programs. And we get very focused on our own assessments of value and our own internal ideas of what engagement means. If an engaged member is a member who's doing what the association wants that member to do, right? We want them to serve on our committees and come to our events and purchase our professional development programs and renew their membership. And if they do all those things that we want, then they are a good engaged member. The problem with this is that the association's needs and goals and desires and outcomes and all that kind of thing do not motivate people. Our members don't care about the association meeting our goals. So Jason, on the next slide, when we think about a new model, this member-centric model of engagement, if we really want to engage our members and help them, we have to flip our thinking around and put them and their goals and their problems and their challenges and their needs and their wants at the center of what we're thinking about. This is more than wordsmithing. I mean, hopefully everybody on the call, on the webinar understands the concept of framing things as benefits rather than features, but this isn't that. It isn't just, choosing the right words in our marketing communications and making sure we talk about things the right way. It's not about what the association wants. It's about the value that the members get out of their relationship with us. So we engage our audiences, members and other audiences, by uncovering their most pressing problems, learning about what their most important goals are, and then creating solutions that help them get there. So if we can flip to the next slide, what we're posing here is, and the insight that Anna and I had, is that we want to flip our mindset from an inside out way of viewing the world with the association at the center to an outside in way of viewing the world with the member at the center. So in the kind of current old school inside out model, we've got, the association, our products are at the center, and we've got these sort of transactional relationships with our members and other audiences where we're pushing products on them. And, we've got this idea of like, we sell, you use. It's a short-term focus. We want to try to get them to buy what we're creating. And we're very focused again on that sort of transactional nature of the relationship. If we flip our perspective around to a more member-centric way of viewing the world, what we're trying to do is help our members find solutions. So this outside-in perspective is based primarily on the research of two guys. One is Ron J. Galati. He is a professor at the Harvard Business School. And the other is a guy named Bill Lee, who wrote a book called The Hidden Wealth of Customers. And so the thesis of The Hidden Wealth of Customers is that engagement is not the same thing as selling. And if we've got this kind of transactional sales focus, what happens is we get very myopic. We are very narrowly focused on, we've created these certain programs, products, and services, and we're trying to get you to buy them. And we'll see this a little bit more in some of the examples. But the idea here is that if you get really narrowly focused on selling your programs, products, and services, you tend to not see other value that's out there in the relationship and in the ecosystem that you create with the community of your members and other audiences. And then we leave that value and the revenue that can accompany it on the table. We never touch that. Now, Ron J. Galati's insight on this whole thing is that we tend to view engagement as one of many things that we're doing. So we've got our membership life cycle, where we're trying to generate leads and recruit people and do our renewal cycles. And then we've got our conference cycle where we've got to do our conference planning, and there's the program and the logistics, and then, getting ready for on-site and all that kind of thing. And we've got our professional development cycles where we're running, webinars or classes or things like that, and our publication cycles that we have to deal with, and our annual audit and getting the, our finances in order every month, and human resources stuff, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, all through this. And then engagement is this other thing, this other program that we've also got to run in the midst of all this other stuff that we're doing. And Galati's insight was engagement is not a separate activity. It is, in fact, the real work of what we're doing. It's not like the real association is over here with all those programs, products, and services, and membership life cycle and renewal cycles, and keeping the finances in good shape and all that kind of thing. And then this engagement is kind of this thing over here on the side that we've got to do. Engagement is foundational to everything else that we do. And organizations, not just associations, but certainly including associations that are successful, are organized around helping our audiences find solutions to their most pressing products. So Jason, if you flip to the next slide, this is another look at that product-centric versus member-centric way of viewing the world. And the specific details aren't super important here, but what you're doing is you're changing your focus from stuff to people, and from sales to relationship, so that the focus of where you're putting your energy and attention and effort completely changes. Now, if we go to the next slide, the other reason that this is important is because our competitive landscape has completely changed. That old model of, we make stuff and we sell it to you and you buy it, and if you do what we want, then you're, a good cooperative, engaged member, is really out of touch with modern consumer reality. So we're all tired of the comparisons, right? We get this from Amazon, and we get, this from Netflix, and we get, this from, pick your favorite social media app. Like all the sort of consumer expectations that have been reset, and associations get tired of being compared against them, because these are large scale companies with lots of resources, and I get that. It's not fair to take your $5 million association and say, well, why can't you be Amazon? Well, they're, billions of dollars company. I mean, that's, however, people have different expectations now. Your members have different expectations now. They are in a world that allows them to do mass personalization, mass customization, that doesn't just segment them in these sort of rough cut ways that we often tend to do, but that truly, in some ways, almost creepy ways, gets to know them as an individual and their preferences. They're used to being able to buy things on demand, to have to pay for only what they actually want and not pay for stuff that they don't want. They're operating in a world of a sharing economy, everything from Uber and Lyft to Airbnb and VRBO. And they're in a world of freemium models, which we all understand if we've ever played Candy Crush, right? The first one's free, but if you want all the help and the good features and more lives and all this kind of thing, you're going to have to pay. Those are all expectations that have been set by people's consumer experiences, but they are now being visited upon associations, whether or not we like it. And our traditional models of thinking about our relationships with our members and other audiences don't accommodate those kinds of changed expectations. So to flip to the next slide, the question becomes, you engage by becoming engaging, by being something that people intrinsically want to participate in, that's meeting important needs, that's helping them solve important problems, that's helping them get to their most meaningful goals, which is great to say. I mean, sure, become engaging, terrific. But how do I actually do that, right? That's the question. And that is what the white paper, which is on the next slide, looks to solve. So, Anna and I did research on 11 different organizations. All of them are membership organizations, but not all of them are associations. Some of them are for-profit membership organizations. And all of these 11 organizations are somewhere along the path to transforming themselves from these inside out, traditional, old school, transactional ways of thinking about the world to outside in, member-centric associations. And as a result of that research, we identified 8 keys to becoming a member-centric outside-in association, which are on our next slide. So these are our 8 keys. And if I was smart, I actually would have put numbers next to them, but I didn't. So with each of these keys, there is an attached membership organization, sometimes for-profit, sometimes nonprofit, a story that goes along with each one of them. And then there are some questions as well to help you begin thinking about how you might apply that key yourself in your own organization. Okay, We are now at the choose your own adventure portion of this presentation, which is we've got 8 keys here, and I need you all to identify 4 that you most want to hear about. So number 1 is think like your members. And you should start writing these into the chat box so that we can pick our 4, the ones that are appealing to you. Number 1 is think like your members. Number 2 is to build real relationships. 3 is to organize around shared purpose. 4 is to focus on outcomes. 5 is co-create. 6 is harness the power of collaborative community. 7 is encourage continuous learning, and 8 is to take the long view. So what do we have showing up in our chat as far as what people would like to hear about? Jason, what do you got for me?
Well, with me hosting the slides, I can't see the chat window. So hold on one second here. Let me pause.
Here we go. Okay, I've got requests for right now for 2, 4, 5, and 8. Okay, let me write those down real quick. 2, 4, 5, 8. You know, Louise, you jumped right in there and got the first thing. Anyone else want to jump in with any requests? So 2 would be our build real relationships. 4 would be focus on outcomes. 5 is co-create. And 8 is take the long view. Okay. We're going to go with those unless anybody else jumps in. Going once, going twice. All right, Louise, you win. We are going to talk about building real relationships, focusing on outcomes, co-creation, and taking the long view. So, Jason, you are now going to be challenged to skip through the Think Like Your Members slides. So go ahead. I'll tell you when to go. There we go. Oh, back up 1. Build relationships. This is going to be very exciting, people. Okay. So the first key that we're going to talk about is building real relationships. And the issue here is building real relationships are not just about the member to the association and the association to the member. It's also about facilitating relationships between members and even non-member stakeholders. It's the idea of creating a network or a web of relationships and recognizing that all of those different hubs on that network contribute at least as much to the shared web of relationship and to the shared value creation as the association does. So you stop looking at the relationships as these transactional kinds of things between the association and the member of the association. We sell you stuff, we get you to volunteer, we get you to show up, etc. And you realize that all of those people, the association, the members, other audiences, your volunteers, chapters, people who are your customers, people who are in your industry but are not necessarily particularly financially tied to the association yet, all of those different players in that network, even people's spouses, partners, kids who influence the amount of time that they can spend on and with your association, those are all part of the chain of value creation and that web of relationship that you're trying to build. So the example here on our next slide is Mensa, American Mensa, and they run SIGs. So those are special interest groups. Many of you probably have special interest groups in your own organizations, but for those of you who don't, special interest groups are usually optional subgroups within your association where they're organized around something that's shared, some kind of shared interest, a shared disciplinary subfield, or in, as we flip to the next slide for Mensa, they are totally unique. So, a lot of times we think of special interest groups, again, like it's a subfield kind of thing. This is the particular area of scientific research that I'm interested in, or this is the particular vertical I'm in our industry, or this is my company size, or something along those lines, or, if I'm a teacher of this particular type, or in this type of school, or in for this grade level, we tend to think of these all in sort of very professional terms in the association world. With Mensa SIGs are different. First, they are totally community created. This is not a structure that the association created that they then imposed on their members. And they don't insist on central control. These truly are grassroots efforts. And there are over 140 different special interest groups in Mensa. And it's everything that you can think of that you could possibly imagine that people could organize around. Some of them are kind of demographic slices that you might think of. People who are physically proximate to each other are in a SIG for different city areas or different states, or different age groups, or, different alumni groups or things like that. But there's also SIGs around pretty much any sport that you can think of in the world, to people who love particular authors or fictional characters. There are a number of adult-oriented special interest groups. There are people who are engaged in home brewing. There are people who love fictional characters like Sherlock Holmes. There are people who do all kinds of crafts. There are art lovers. There are parrot heads. There are vegans, right? There's everything that you can think about that might be of interest to a person. American Mensa, the organization for smart people, allows them to get together with others who are of like mind. And again, this is not centrally controlled. There's all kinds of really wacky stuff that they organize around, but it's because somebody inherently loves that and they want to gather others who are like them to build relationships around that shared passion. So Pam Donahoe, who is the CEO over there, said that, what she's heard from members is the whole, I don't have to explain my jokes. And if any of you either yourself are nerdy about something in particular or have someone in your life like that, you know what she means, right? There's stuff that is intrinsic to that interest area that means you're part, quote unquote, like part of the tribe. You know the stuff. You've got the in news there. You don't have to explain that to people, right? You found the others who are like you, whether it's, parrot head or home brewing, or, you really love Star Trek, right? There are others like you who get your jokes. And so, as Pam describes it, she said it creates juiciness in their membership. People are pursuing their passions, and all the association is doing is facilitating that. They're creating an umbrella under which those people can self-organize. So our next slide is the challenge for you all as you think about this particular key is, where is the juiciness in your community, in your association? Could you provide a platform for people to self-organize around it where they get to control what's happening, not the association? Okay, moving on to our next key. We're going to flip through organizing around shared purpose and go on to focusing on outcomes. One more slide, two more slides, sorry. Keep going. There we go. Focus on outcomes. Okay. So that's our second key that we're going to discuss. Jason, if you flip to the next slide, this is the situation that we're in associations. We tend to ask our members, what do you want? If I'd asked people what they want, according to Henry Ford, they would have said faster horses, right? So this is the Steve Jobs thing, right? He said, he was famous for saying people don't know what they want until you show it to them. I didn't know that I wanted to be able to carry around thousands of songs in my pocket until I saw the iPod, and then I was like, wow, that's amazing. I totally want to carry thousands of songs around in my pocket. And when we ask people what they want, they usually say, I don't know. They don't have a good sense of what the possibilities are that are outside the range of my Walkman or Discman, where I can have one album, or a horse that goes faster, right? Like I can't conceptualize of a car. All I can think is, it'd be great if I could get from A to B faster. So I need a horse that can run faster. Instead of asking our members what they want, what we need to think about is asking them what they're trying to accomplish, what the problems are that they have that they can't solve. I mean, the whole reason that people associate in the first place is because they're trying to do something, right? They're trying to solve a problem. They're trying to accomplish a goal that they have discovered that they are unable to do on their own, or at least they've intuited that it would be easier to do it as a group. Associations need to focus on solving problems and providing solutions more than focusing on making our sales numbers or our revenue numbers. Now, that freaks everybody out, right? Because no money, no mission. The point that Bill Lee makes in The Hidden Wealth of the Customer is that if you do a good job at helping people solve their most pressing problems and achieve their most important goals, you will actually achieve the piece that is meeting our revenue goals, meeting our attendance goals, keeping the money coming in so that we can keep promoting our mission. So our story here, our example here on our next slide is the Home Builders and Remodelers Association of Connecticut, their Hobie Awards. Now, probably most of the association folks on this call have, thank you, Jason, excellent timing, have some sort of awards program. And in fact, the Home Builders and Remodelers of Connecticut had an awards program as well. And it was a typical kind of association, somewhat inward-looking type awards program. So, they would thank the outgoing chair of the board and thank the board directors and thank the committee chairs and recognize, where the association had met its financial goals for the year and had met attendance goals for the year and had met, retention goals for the year and talk about how great it was that so many people had turned up at the meeting. And it was dull, honestly. And we've all been at those sessions, right? The association is patting itself on the back and, recognizing, the kind of the insiders, the board members, the frequent volunteers, all that kind of thing. And the rest of us are sitting there going, well, why do I even care about this? And the answer is you mostly don't, right? And so when Bill Ethier came on as CEO, he realized that this was dead dull, and he decided that he was going to completely change their awards program. What do home builders and remodelers need? What is an important problem that they have they need to be able to solve? Well, if you've ever been on the consumer side of hiring somebody to do work on your house, you know the answer to this. How do I pick one over the other? How do I know who's good? Is there some kind of seal of approval out there? And, I got to ask around in the neighborhood listserv or ask around in the neighborhood next door community, ask my friends. All right, I get references that are only the most happiest, most blissed out customers that person's ever had, and they don't ever tell me about the projects that didn't go so well, right? So, how do I find out who's going to give me great quality, great price, do a great job, and hopefully not make me want to kill myself by the end of my renovation? And Bill realized that's exactly what his members needed. They needed an independent, objective verification that they did good work. So he recreated their Hobie Awards to focus on excellence in building and remodeling. And there were all kinds of different categories that he created around this. There's bathroom renovations under $10,000, bathroom renovations above $25,000, remodeling projects, new custom construction at different price ranges, kitchen remodels at different price ranges, different sizes, all this kind of stuff. And then they reformed their entire awards program around focusing on good work that the members were doing and giving them something valuable that they could then use in their marketing. So, if I'm a kitchen remodeler, I can say, hey, I won the Hobie Award this year for kitchen remodels above $50,000. And then somebody can look at me and say, aha, this is a third-party group that has said that this lady does good renovation work. That's important to me, right? That's a sign that I might want to hire her. And also, in the process of this, they made the event itself more fun. They found a great MC among their members who is super personable and fun and exciting. And Bill said they kind of turned it into, quote unquote, the Oscars of the home building industry. So then our challenge question becomes, if we can get to the next slide, which of your current programs, products, or services, right? Because the Home Builders and Remodelers Association of Connecticut already did awards. Which of your current programs, products, and services could you possibly reframe or flip around to help members achieve their most important goals?
And I'm going to interject here because I can't get over the happenstance of this, that I had breakfast this morning with a local ad agency who is a member of the MM&M, which has to do with medical marketing. And she said this very thing, that the huge value that they have in being members is the awards they won, and then they leverage those. So what a happy coincidence.
Yeah, because again, I need to say I'm the best. Well, how do I say I'm the best? I get a third party to say I'm the best. Yeah, so just, think about, is there something like that that your association already does that you could flip around or reframe in a way to be more member-centric? Okay, this time we're moving on to just the next slide, so that's great. Okay, so our next key is, our key number 5, is to co-create. So if we go to the next slide, historically, when we think about the way associations usually make programs, products, and services for our members, we create it, and then our members consume it. And that is not the best way to help make sure that you're meeting their needs, helping them achieve their most important goals, solve their most pressing problems, right? The best way to make sure your programs, products, and services actually help them is to invite them in to build stuff with you. You have, I guarantee, a bunch of really smart people who deeply understand your profession or your industry and who want to be able to contribute to the success of your profession or your industry among your existing base of stakeholders. Your existing volunteers, your existing members, your existing customers, other people who are in your profession or industry who maybe aren't super involved with your association yet, right? Because the way that they want to contribute hasn't presented itself yet. What are you doing to harness all those people who want to help? So our story here is the National Fluid Power Association. Now, the National Fluid Power Association is the association of people, of companies that do hydraulics. Anything where you need to lift or move or change something that's really heavy and really big, where you need to use hydraulic power to do that. That's what the National Fluid Power Association does. And they have this co-created product called their Standards Locator. So you want to flip on to the next slide. Now, as you might expect, hydraulic power is a capital-intensive industry. These are the equipment and all that sort of thing, the facilities. This is not cheap stuff. And so being able to use data to plan future investments is really, really important. This is not something where you can, quickly run out and pick up a few more of these, hydraulic machines, right? These are massive capital investments. It takes a long time of planning. You're going to have a long lifespan on these, so you're going to be depreciating them over many years, right? You need to be able to use solid data to plan what you're going to do. And NFPA had data that was accessible to their members online. And they had good data that was accessible to their members online, but nobody was using it. They couldn't figure out why. They didn't know what was happening. So they put together a working group to say, what is going on here? Like, we know that you need this data. You tell us that you need this data. We have this data. No one uses it. What's the problem? Well, it turned out their system was totally, you might have guessed, not user-friendly. And it took way too much effort to try to learn how to use it and how to get the data out and have it reported in any kind of functional, usable, helpful, useful kind of way. And so what they did with this working group is they pulled together their power users. So this was people who had already put in the effort to at least learn how to use the system somewhat. They also hired a professor to help them with data architecture, and they allowed that professor that they hired and those power users they pulled together to create a user-friendly online system for trend and market analysis and forecasting. Later on, they were able to roll this out and get people to start using it because it was actually user-friendly. It made it easy for people to get out the data that they needed to see. Later on, they brought together a second working group to say, okay, now we've been using this for a little while. Tell us what's missing, right? They didn't try to get everything that anybody might ever want on the first try. They went ahead and iterated, and in their second working group said, okay, well, this system that we've got here is much better than the old system, and we can use it. We can get the data out that we want. But our CEOs are never going to bother to learn how to do reporting, no matter how easy you make it. What we need is CEO dashboards, and we can help you figure out when a CEO from a given company logs in what he or she is going to need to see as sort of top-line information that's on a dashboard that's just sitting there waiting for them. And they are now onto their third iteration of that standards locator, and they are co-creating once again with a working group of their users. The association didn't sit down and decide to do it themselves internally and build this whole thing and then do this kind of big reveal launch out to the world when it was done, where it's like you bet everything on this one roll of the dice and does it hit or does it not. They actually worked with their members along the way to create something that everyone would find valuable and useful. So the question here on our challenge side becomes, where, if we can go to the next slide, where can you invite your members into your current process of creation? Don't operate in stealth mode and sit back there and build everything, and don't let any word of it get out until it's all finished. And we all are guilty of this, right? Because we want to be able to give something to our members that is beautiful and works well and works perfectly and does everything they need. That's the wrong way of approaching things. Now, that's not to say that every single member in your association, every single stakeholder in your community is the right person to help co-create. Some people don't want to be able to see what's going on behind the scenes and weigh in on how things go and how things are going to operate. But some people do. Look for them and think about ways that you can invite them in earlier in the process to help you build things so that you can be certain that you are, in fact, solving their problems. You have identified the correct problems. Your solution does work. You have identified the correct goals. Your solution does work, and they can help co-create that with you. Okay, so Jason, we are now going to flip through two sets. One is harness the power of collaborative community. Second one is encourage continuous learning. And then we're going to land on take the long view. Okay, so take the long view, or flipping to the next slide, as my friend's daughter says, patience is in fact hard. And when you think about flipping your perspective on how you view the world, how your association operates, coming around to this member-centric way of viewing things, you've probably already figured out this is going to involve testing new ideas, new ways of operating, new ways of measuring success. This is not to say that revenue isn't important, right? We're back to no money, no mission, right? You have to keep in the black, otherwise you can't continue to operate. But some of these less tangible types of value may take a little bit longer to reveal themselves. And one thing that we can be guilty of is when something doesn't work right away, we have a tendency to try to kill it. Patience is hard. When you're thinking about trying to become more member-centric, instead of killing something that doesn't seem to be working right away, you want to think about how can we pivot? How can we iterate and keep on testing? We want to scratch. We tried that once and it didn't work, out of our vocabularies. So the story here is the community roundtables, virtual happy hours. If we can flip to the next slide. So the community roundtable is one of our full case studies in the white papers. We've got a total of 11 stories. 4 of them are full-on, large-scale case studies. The other 7 are kind of some of those smaller stories, like some of the things we've already talked about. But the community roundtable is a for-profit membership organization, and they are up to a lot more than just virtual happy hours. But this one little piece here is kind of a fun story. So, if you flip to the next slide, the goal of the Community Roundtable, they are a for-profit membership organization for people who run online communities. And their goal is to help members who are in different functions running online communities, who are in different locations around the U.S., who are in different industries, serving different professions, collide. I'm making air quotes because that's their term. They want them to be able to collide in meaningful and productive ways to build relationships amongst each other and spark creative ideas for doing outstanding community management. One of the ideas they had for ways of doing this was virtual happy hours. So the Community Roundtable has intentionally kept their membership small. They have wanted to be purposeful about growth. They've wanted to grow relatively slowly. And because of that, a real happy hour wouldn't work. They might only have a handful of members or less in a given city. So they can't get people together in person if there's only 2 of you in your city who are actually current members. So they decided they wanted to try a virtual happy hour. And it's just like what's shown here on the screen, right? You get people together and, you crack open your favorite beverage, either, adult or non, and you get together on their virtual platform with other community managers around the U.S. They held the first one and it flopped. Literally not one single person came to it. 0 people attended their first virtual happy hour, other than staff, of course. But they believed in this as an idea. They thought it was a good thing to try to do. They thought it would achieve some important goals, so they kept at it. The next time they held one, a few people came. The time after that, a few more people came, right? And they gave it time and space to build. Now, part of the reason that they were able to do this is this was a small bet. They already had the technology platform to be able to do this, and all it needed was sending out a notification to everyone, hey, this is when the virtual happy hour is, and then having a couple of staff people sitting there with their coffee or their beer or whatever it was that they were going to be drinking to kind of monitor things and to host, right? This was a small bet that they could make, which allowed them to give it some runway, to give it some time to actually be able to take off. And it's now a very popular and very successful program that they're able to offer to their members. It just needed a little space. So the story here is, the lesson here is, don't be too quick to pull the plug. If we move on to the next slide, our challenge slide, so think about an idea that you've wanted to try with your community of members and other audiences. And then think about, how can you design a small experiment, something that is low investment, low risk, to start testing it out. Because again, remember, if you've got that small experiment, if you've got that low risk investment, you can give it a little time to see if it works. Okay, so let's flip to the next slide, which is once again a review of our 8 keys. So again, we got to 2, 4, 5, and 8. Build real relationships, focus on outcomes, co-create, and take the long view. The other keys are described in the white paper that will be one of the handouts from this session. So before we get to my final thoughts for you all and my final question for you, I wanted to stop and see if we have any questions from the audience, which is our cute little dude on our next slide there in front of his big question mark pondering. So anyone have any questions before I leave you with a question and a couple of final thoughts? Going once. I've got nothing coming up so far. So Jason, did you have anything? I think you had some stuff that had occurred to you.
So many questions. I think the big one that I have, and this is me putting on my hat as a board member of Executive Connections and the SLSAE, is how you answer the question of these programs. Like, where do these programs come from without a Steve Jobs or a Henry Ford?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. And in answer to that, going back to these 11 organizations, they came from all over the place. So it wasn't like there was certainly some associations have started to put together like innovation groups or things like that, and that can be a source of this. But I don't think you necessarily have to have a formally structured innovation group in order to get this, right? You just need to be open to new ideas, and they can come from anywhere. And that I think it raises an interesting question for all of us to pose to ourselves within our own organizations, which is, who's allowed to have an idea? And I use the term allowed very specifically, because one of the things that has struck me ever since the beginning of my own career is there's pockets of insight all over your organization, a lot of times at relatively low levels, that never make their way up the ladder. And so, who's quote unquote allowed to have an idea? Well, the executive director, CEO is always allowed to have an idea, right? The COO or deputy director is always allowed to have an idea. Maybe department directors are allowed to have an idea, but what about your line staff? What about people who are interacting with different components of your community or your audience every day? Are your members allowed to have an idea, right? Board directors are always allowed to have an idea, and committee chairs are probably allowed to have an idea. But what about Joe or Mary regular member person? Are they allowed to have an idea? And so this does relate to one of the keys that we didn't talk about, which is the whole idea of continuous learning. So if this is a question for you, like where are all these ideas going to come from? Spend a little time reading that section of the white paper because they can come from anywhere. One of my favorite quotes from the movie Ratatouille is, not everyone can be a great chef, but a great chef can come from anywhere. This is the same thing, right? Not everyone is going to have a great idea, but a great idea can come from anywhere. But you have to encourage people to do that. I talked a lot about, question from Laurie. I talked a lot about for-profit organizations. Do you see the 8 points working for nonprofits as well? Would you do anything differently? Actually, the only for-profit that we talked about was the Community Roundtable. So they are a for-profit membership organization. Mensa and the National Fluid Power Association, and now I am forgetting who was my other building real relationships. I'm forgetting who my other case study was. But
the house people, the
thank
renovators.
You. Yeah, thank you. Yes, the Home Builders and Renovators Association. Thank you. They are actually all nonprofit membership associations. Now, if you're thinking sort of beyond the association space, more into a cause-oriented organization or a fundraising organization, it is still the case that you have relationships with your donors, whether those are one-time $5 donors, whether those are your major donors, whether those are your corporate supporters, whether those are the individuals or entities that your nonprofit is serving, right? You have relationships with all those. They're all coming to you because they want to accomplish something. They all have problems they're trying to solve. The theories still apply. You just probably don't want to call those people members. Do we have any other questions? Maybe you can answer maybe one more before I kind of get into my wrap up and then hand things back over to Jason.
This is quite the interactive audience today. I think, if it's okay, I'll pose another one, and that is the idea. I'm actually curious. This is more not necessarily to you, Elizabeth, but to the listening audience. Is how do you, as an association, how do you get feedback from your members? What kind? Do you even have mechanisms for encouraging that from the audience? I know from the perspective of us working as a partner, a lot of what we build is to get information out, to communicate alerts, communicate emails, to communicate broadcast messages. But as I'm thinking about this, there are a handful of examples I can think of among our clients of how they get feedback. But I'm curious, and feel free, Elizabeth, if you have an example of how people go about that so they can spur on these kind of ideas.
Yeah, associations can get really shouty. Where we're constantly bombarding people with, listen to us, pay attention to us, we have all this stuff, and it can become, a very one-way type relationship. We are creating, we are making, we are producing, shout, 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 you sit there and passively consume. And that is not the direction that we want to go if we're trying to have this more member-centric way of viewing the world. So, folks want to type into the Q&A, some of your experiences with getting information or soliciting feedback from members. But, and I think Amanda had actually talked about this in the prior webinar. You have to talk to people. And we get really scared about that. Oh God, what if they're upset about something? What if they say something negative? What if they feel like we're bothering them? Well, they do feel like you're bothering them because every time you contact them, you're trying to sell them something. We're trying to change that relationship dynamic here, people. We're trying to get to the point that our members view us in a different way. And part of that involves actually acting differently, right? It's the whole thing of you can want their perspective on you to be whatever you want it to be, but that doesn't matter. What matters is their actual experience of you. Stop shouting, stop marketing, stop promoting all the time, and actually talk to them. And that can happen in a variety of ways. That can happen, certainly, obviously, anytime you got people gathered in person, have real conversations with people, not just where you're trying to encourage them to do whatever it is the association wants them to do, but where you're actually talking about some of the things that we've talked about today. What are the problems that you're facing in your day-to-day business, in your day-to-day profession, your day-to-day industry work that you can't seem to solve? These are problems that so far have proven themselves to be intractable. What is it that you're trying to accomplish this month, this quarter, this year in your business? And stop trying to worry about it. Now I've got to push this association program or product or service on you. Just talk to people. Talk to your customer service staff. Again, back to that whole thing of people who are on the front line. Hear all kinds of things. Nobody ever asks them about it. They're the ones who know what's going on with your members and other audiences day to day. Talk to them. What are you hearing from people? And listen, and then do something with what they say. Right? You've got to encourage them to continue to share the insights that they're getting. Listen in on what's going on online. That can be your online private community. That can be a LinkedIn group. That can be a Facebook group. That can be paying attention to chatter on other social media platforms around your industry, right? But always be open to what you're hearing. And then that's step one. Step two is you've got to find a way to share that internally. You've got pockets of wisdom all over your association that other people don't know about. The people don't know about outside of their core team because there's no way of sharing that information. Make sure you've got a mechanism for sharing that. So, Jason, if you want to flip to the next slide, I want to pose a question for you, which is I want you to think about everything from today's presentation and think about something that you can do differently tomorrow. When we go to conferences or we participate in webinars or we have an opportunity to learn something new, if you're anything like me, you get really excited, you've got a great idea, and then nothing happens, right? Because you go back to your desk, you go back to your email, you go back to your office, and all of a sudden, you're back into the daily grind, and this great idea that you had, this thing that was really interesting to you, nothing ever happens. So while you are thinking about one thing, it can be really small, that you want to do differently as a result of this, and as I get into my final couple of slides, I'm going to ask you to open your calendar. Hopefully the 29th isn't Thanksgiving. Let me check this really quick. Is the 29th actually Thanksgiving Day? Hopefully not. It is not. It's the Friday after Thanksgiving. Okay, don't do that. Go to Monday, December 2nd. Open your calendar, go to Monday, December 2nd, and put a reminder to yourself about whatever it is, big or small, something that you wanted to do a little differently as a result of the conversation we've had here today. You're going to act as your own accountability buddy and say, in just over a month, whatever happened to that? Okay, so moving on to, as you're thinking about that, writing something on December 2nd, our next slide, I have two parting thoughts for you. Parting thought one is here. The goal of this whole white paper, this whole research project that Anna and I engaged in, all these stories that we've collected and told, is to get associations to shift our perspective. And the reason we want to do that is because we want associations to not just be a quote unquote nice to have kind of thing that if I've got some spare money and time, I might put it into this. We want to position associations to be critical partners in our members' personal and professional success, helping them achieve their most important, most significant goals. That's why we're asking you to do the hard work of changing your perspective. And Jason, if we move to the next slide, in fact, this is hard work. What we learned through our research is this is not an easy process. It represents a complete shift in perspective and a complete shift in the way your association views the world and operates within the space of your profession or industry. But it's achievable. And not just by big associations with big resources. So many of the organizations that we talked to and profiled are somewhere kind of on the path rather than at the destination. Again, we've got a handful of full-on case studies of organizations that either were built from the ground up or were able to completely transform themselves into these member-centric outside-in associations. But most of them are somewhere along the way. They've picked one program, one product, one service, a standards locator, an awards program, SIGs, something where they can change that one thing to be member-centric. You got to start somewhere. You pick one thing where you can have an impact and let that be the seed. Nothing persuades like success. When you're thinking about how to start with this, start with something that is largely or entirely under your control, where you can make some of those small bet changes and then be able to demonstrate to the rest of your team, whether that is your department, whether that's your entire association, whether that's your board of directors, hey, if we can do things differently, look at the success that we can enjoy because of that. Now let's talk about what's the next thing where we can make that move. And with that, I will turn it over to Jason.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. This was a very, very interesting presentation, as I hoped it would be. I loved all the stories. As I do with every webinar that we put on, guys, I just asked for a couple of seconds to kind of explain why we do this and connect the dots to why we invite experts like Elizabeth to come talk to our audience. It's largely because we're an enterprise-level digital firm based in St. Louis. Now, that connecting the dots, where that connected to Elizabeth's presentation today, in a way I hadn't anticipated and heard only in the latter moments of this idea of innovation, is while Engage is in the association space, and as evidenced by all these systems that we work with on the screen, we are at our hearts and in our history a custom software development firm. So if you came to us and said, we have this innovative idea and we need it to be built on software, we would be the type of firm you would come to. If you're not that creative and you just want to use an existing system, we're also that firm, and we can use, apply our services in analytics and design and CMS and AMS and CRM. But if you do feel like you have this idea, even if you just want to flesh out the concept, give me a call. I'm more than happy to talk about that. We have done some pretty innovative things, both in the corporate world and in the association space. So with that, I think we're coming up right on the 1 o'clock hour in Central Standard. So out of respect for everybody's time, I'm going to just say thank you and jump ahead here to our information that we have the next webinar coming up. It is on the schedule for November 20th. Save the date. It's going to be a presentation on member experience. And so I know that's important for our clients, so I imagine it's important to you as well. And I also just want to say again, thank you for attending. Much like those happy hour events that group puts on, you can't always know if people are going to show. So when people show, and when they show in a good sized group, we really appreciate it. We appreciate you showing up so that Elizabeth can give her presentation. If you have any follow-up questions, if you have anything you want to post to social media crediting Elizabeth, please do so. Again, thank you for your attendance. Recordings will be sent out to everybody who attended.
Thanks,
Have
everyone.
a wonderful afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.